some of the less educated priests and people involved with the school. And of course there was Aunt Irene, who was never uh, in Greenwich except once a year when she could come to visit. She always worked off in other parts of Connecticut for the Sacred Heart thing. We didn't have anything to do with the Sacred Heart. Our religious education was all with the Madams of the Sacred Heart, which was a totally different organization. The nuns were never called sister, they were always called mother. And they had these very elaborate white things, coifs, that they wore around. And they all their convents were in very beautiful old estates that had been given to them. And I remember my parents used to drive me every Sunday morning. We would go to church, and then they would drive me up to Norotan, Connecticut, on the old Boston Post Road, a lot of which was still cobblestone. Not all, but a lot of it. And I would go to this really gorgeous white marble estate with great blue lawns, and the madams that had been given to the Madams of the Sacred Heart. And it was a really snobby class kind of a thing. And that's where Mother Tack was my teacher for where I got my first communion, preparing me for my first communion and everything. But instead of, they wouldn't have dreamt of taking me to, of course there was religious education at the Catholic Church on the main street in Greenwich. But, that was where all the servants' kids and everything went, and not us. We were different. Anyway, I don't know how the connection was made, but at some point after we moved to the Robinson house, my mother was asked to teach in New Rochelle, which was down the line towards New York City. It was a fairly sizable town down there. She was asked to teach in the Madams of the Sacred Heart down there, to teach speech and drama. And so she would teach at our house, and then in the afternoons would drive down to New Rochelle and teach, and then come back. And then World War II had pretty well started by then. And she...
1942 or something?
Well, 41, December 41 was Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
And I'm not sure when she first got people to help, but I remember a good friend, Mrs. Newton, was a lovely lady who was a friend of Mother's, came from the other side of town and taught mathematics, though Mother had done brilliantly with mathematics. But and then she had another person come and teach art. And I don't think there were ever more than 18 or 20 students. It was still called Mrs. Teal's classes. But man, oh man, did you ever get an education there? Wow. And it was actually, it wasn't a great thing for me, because being her daughter, I was expected to do everything perfectly. 100 A's and hundreds, no excuse for anything else. And she had no patience if there wasn't. It was not great for our relationship. So I was saying that she went down to this school in New Rochelle in the afternoons, maybe twice a week or something like that. And then as the war came on more, there was gas rationing, so then she would take the train down. And bit by bit, she would be teaching in Manhattanville on, I remember, Thursday, maybe Monday and Thursday afternoons. Then she was asked to teach, that was at Ursuline Academy, right? That was in New Rochelle. Then after that, she was still teaching there when she was asked to teach, something,
No, that was so funny.
at Manhattanville
Mhm.
in New York City, 120, 100 and something or other street. Again, another convent of the Sacred Heart, but of boarding schools. And that's where all the Kennedy girls went. Eunice and Pat and all the others. Jack Kennedy's sisters all went there. And Ethel actually was taken out of the Greenwich Academy. She and I were very good friends for a couple of years, and then her mother snatched her out and sent her to Manhattanville. And so Mother taught there and would put on these very successful plays. I think she would go there sometimes. I don't remember what her schedule there was, but somehow or other she would be either once a week or every other week or something at these, and she taught speech and drama in these places. And then, at one point, she was asked to teach at the Madams of the Sacred Heart in Providence, Rhode Island. And I think either every other weekend or maybe one weekend a month, she would get on a train, travel for 4 hours to Providence, and spend the whole weekend there, and then go back home. This incredible schedule. Meanwhile, teaching everybody in our classroom at home, making out the tests, correcting everything with elaborate notes and everything on it. And we did for a very short while, maybe for a year or so, during the war, we had a couple, Sophie and Joseph, Polish couple who were refugees from Europe, and they came, and Sophie cooked, and Joseph was supposed to feed the furnace and take care of the place. Because meanwhile, Daddy was going to work every day in New York, and in those days, you worked half